It is 7 p.m. on Tuesday, February 19th, and this is a regular meeting of the Richfield School Board. In attendance this evening, we have board members Paula Cole, Peter Tensing, John Ashmead, Tim Paulus, Christine Malik, and student board representative Diego Luis Niquillo. And it's possible that our second student board member representative, Ms. Yerafosan, will be joining us as well. We will strive to remain focused on Richfield Public Schools' mission statement that Richfield Public Schools inspires and empowers each individual to learn, grow, and excel as we conduct our meeting this evening. And want to just share a special thank you to everyone who is here with us tonight. We appreciate your presence and especially your support of the two programs who are presenting this evening. Our first item of business is to approve the agenda before us. Is anyone prepared to move the agenda as presented?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Paulus.
Second.
A second by Ms. Malik. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the agenda is approved. Moving into the information and proposals non-action items section of the agenda. As this is the second meeting of the month, we have time on the agenda for public comment. We received no requests for public comment and no one has signed up to speak this evening. So I will just note that the next opportunity for public comment will be at our meeting on Monday, March 18th. So next we have the superintendent update, which this evening contains two presentations from very important groups. So Superintendent Unesi, would you like to introduce the first group?
Absolutely. So I am excited to welcome Ms. Jesperson and the team from the American Indian Education Advisory Council to the podium. And they are providing an update on some of the work that we've been doing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Jesperson, the team from the American Indian Outreach team.
All right. So first I wanted to introduce our American Indian Parent Advisory Committee. The American Indian Parent Advisory Committee is made up of parents or guardians of American Indian or Native American children attending Richfield Public Schools. We try to meet every other month. Sometimes those meetings are more informal and we'll meet before family or community events that we're holding. They serve in an advisory role for the American Indian Education Program here, as well as helping meet family events. So I'd like to introduce our two members that are here today. We have Rebecca Clays. You can introduce yourself and share a little bit.
I'm the chair of the Parent Advisory Committee. I have 3 daughters at Centennial. I'm a co-chair of Parent Advisory Committee. My son Hunter, he attends Richfield Middle School.
And then we have two general members who are not able to make it tonight, Rachel and Andrea. And they have kids at RSTEM and RMS. I have an update here on numbers of students at different sites throughout the district. The numbers have grown since last year, so you can see that we went up from 117 students on the native student list up to 127 this year. And then for the documented membership 506 forms, which is where the Title VI federal funding comes from, we are up to 42 forms so far this year. So, and you can see below the breakdown of the different sites and how many native students are at each different site. The only one I realized today that's missing from there is the Central Education Center, and they have 1 student, so that should be on there as well. And like I said, I just realized that today. Here's a little breakdown of our state and federal funding. The state funding is through the Minnesota Department of Education's American Indian Education Program, and then our federal funding, which we received for the first time for the that we applied for during the 16-17 school year. We've increased every year. We started out with 13 506 forms, which was about $4,000 extra for Indian and here in Richfield. And we are up to this year, like I said, 42 forms so far, which the amount they haven't given us yet because we're actually still in the process of applying for part 1 of that federal funding grant. So it'll probably be, it'll obviously be at least 7,500. So that's going to happen probably in April that we'll see the amount of it. Here's how our American Indian Education Program goals align to the world's best workforce. These are the same goals that go on our Minnesota Department of Education plan. They're basically the same every year, except we adjust the numbers a little bit. We want to have all American Indian children ready for school, which is 100% of all identified American Indian kindergarten students will meet grade level proficiency on the NUP or CPAA assessment. All AI third graders achieve grade level literacy. So we have 14 third graders in the district, and we want to have 60% of them meet proficiency this spring. We want to have all achievement gaps closed for all AI students. All AI students attain career and college readiness, and all AI students graduate from high school. So we've had, for the graduation rate, we've had 100% graduation all 3 years. So hopefully that continues this year. All right, so I want to highlight some of our new program highlights for this school year, the school year 18-19. So far, we've had 3 college visits offered. We went to the U of M Native Student Visit Day, the Native American College Fair, and Augsburg University's Native Student Visit Day. We also had a Native Family Night, a Native Culture Club and Beading Club after school at Richfield High School. We have a new partnership with the South Metro Indian Education Committee, and there are new Native author books purchased for all media centers district-wide. And we had our free Drum Teaching for Success classes, which we're going to have Becca talk a little bit about.
Drumming's always been a big part of our family. So this program is really cool because it taught my kids aspects of drumming they would have never known otherwise. They got to actually like sew hides and stretch them and tie everything up. They learned new songs in their language. It was so much fun. And the kids were so engaged and just happy, and it was really exciting.
Yeah. It was a really positive thing, and that opportunity was from the Indian Health Board of Minneapolis, and it was taught by staff members of the Indian Health Board of Minneapolis. We had 11 class sessions, and they were followed by a celebration feast. So like Becca said, it was really positive, and it was a really good thing for our kids that took that program and finished it up. And then something else I'm going to have Lisa highlight is our new connection this year with the South Metro Indian Education Committee.
Yeah, so this year Richfield is partnering with other South Metro Indian education programs from Burnsville, Prior Lake, Shakopee, Rosemont, Napa Valley, Egan, Farmington, and Lakeville. And they meet monthly to plan the South of the River powwow, which will be held at Burnsville High School on May 18th. And so powwows are kind of like a celebration where people come together and we dance and sing, and they have vendors there. You can buy arts and crafts from Native artists. So that is going to be really fun. So everyone in the city of Richfield will be invited to attend that powwow this year. In addition to that, we also have, it's kind of a program that leads up to the powwow, is we have a drum and dance class. And so we're teaching students how to drum and teach them songs as a drum group, and we're also having a dance class to teach them how to dance certain dance styles for the powwow. That has been a really successful collaboration between all the South Metro districts. We have between 60 and 80 people attend each drum and dance session. I believe 5 to 7 families from Richfield attend, which is a really good turnout for Richfield, considering it's kind of a smaller district compared to the other districts in the South Metro. And so at these events, we provide dinner and also the dance instruction for the kids. And it's a really good way for our kids to meet other Native students here in the suburbs. So I think it's a really good, positive experience for them.
Thank you, Lisa. There are a couple of more upcoming highlights for the rest of the school year. We'll have some sort of representation at the Richfield Health and Wellness Expo in April. They're going to have an AI high school student field trip to the Minnesota Institute of Arts for an exclusive early tour of the Hearts of Our People Native Women Artists in May. The invitations for that event were only sent out to Indian Ed programs in the metro area, so I figured that'd be a great thing to take advantage of and get the high schoolers together to go to that in May. We already have our time reserved and everything. We also have our ongoing drum and dance classes, like Lisa was talking about, leading up to the South of the River powwow on May 18th, which is open to anybody that's interested in learning more about and experiencing Native culture. It's a great event to go to. We're also going to have our next family night is going to feature Ojibwe artist Gordon Coons in March. So he'll be working with our Native families to create prints that they can take home. And we also have to hold a public hearing, which is just a fancy word for a presentation, on Title VI funding in the spring, and that date is to be determined because it depends on when they give us the amount of money that we're getting from Title VI. So those are just some of the upcoming highlights for this year. All right, Rebecca will read about the vote of concurrence.
Each year, the members of the parent committee vote on if they agree with the content and completion of the Indian Education Program Plan, commit to evaluating the IEPP at the end of the school year to ensure that it's continuing to meet the needs of American Indian students. Everyone voted concurrence this year.
And with no recommendations, so nothing else to add other than just, yep. All right, and that, I believe, is
That is it.
yeah. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Sarah and Rebecca and Lisa, for being here. I look forward to this every year, and I'm continually impressed by the work that you are doing and the way that you're growing this deeply important program for our students and families. So just want to say thank you before we take any other questions or comments.
I just have a question about the growth. The growth year to year, is that a function of like your ability and to the outreach and the growth of the program and word of mouth and the people who are in it sharing with others that they could participate, or is it more towards we have new students new to the district who?
It's kind of a combination of both. Word of mouth, and I do set up info tables at different events. So people who aren't flagged in Synergy will come up to me and say, oh wait, I'm Native, I want to be added to your list, and I'll add them on. And then that's a big part of getting these new families in the system and on my list. But then also, yeah, this year we did have a lot more Native families that just kind of came to the district naturally. During the enrollment center in August, I met a couple of new families and I got at least 10 new Title VI forms filled out at that registration.
So funding really depends on how many forms we can get filled out. And so Sarah has been doing a really great job getting those every year, as you saw from that one slide. She keeps getting more and more.
Yeah, she's going above and beyond.
Thank you.
So I'll restate that and acknowledge so Sarah doesn't have to say it about herself. Sarah and this committee have done an incredible job. If we think back, there was a set of recommendations about continuing to support her role, expanding into the summer and making sure that she continues on. And as Sarah has stayed with our district and has continued to grow within the position, you also see the influence of this group continuing to grow. And so we're excited to have Sarah in this leadership spot and excited to have her continue because you can see that she's getting great results with our kids and with our community. And the strength of that community is continuing to grow within Richfield Public Schools. So exciting to see and exciting for us. Good job.
And I think that it's also important for us to recognize the efforts of Lisa, Becca, and your other committee members. It's people like you that make this district a wonderful place to be, and so we really do appreciate it.
And we're excited to recognize you a little bit more in a couple of minutes, Sarah, since there's a commendation specifically for you in the board packet tonight. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so the second of our community-based presentations comes to us from Carol McNaughton-Commerce and the group in community education. And so we are looking at a conversation about community education. And so Carol's going to get us going.
Thank you, Dr. Messi. Good evening, board members and members in the audience. I'm pleased to be here to provide another update on our community education. I believe I was here last April, just shy of a year since our separation from the Bloomington Partnership for Community Education. So now we're at a point where we are in year number 2. We are just publishing our 6th community education catalog. I have with me to provide some moral support in the audience here, 2 of our advisory council members that have kind of helped us shape these programs. Dave Bipes and Yakaira Rodriguez are here and supporting us. Our advisory council, as we shared last meeting, is a diverse but small group, and we are continuing to build that group out. So look forward to more updates about the council itself at a future meeting. Something that is kind of exciting, we have to give a thumbs up here to Richfield regarding our catalog. We've been doing a lot to focus on what our brand is in Richfield and how we're tailoring our activities and programs and services. So we got a little shout out here in an international publication for lifelong learning. Richfield Public Schools as an example of one of the good catalog features that we have. So these catalogs that we are distributing, it's about 20,000 copies that are sent out to the entire school district as well as beyond, people on our mailing lists and at various events and in the community. Beginning next Wednesday, that sixth one will arrive on the 27th, so look for that as well. We also have some new features in that catalog. Something that we realized right away when we started producing our catalogs was the youth and early learning programs distributed at our schools are fully translated into Spanish. And the community-wide catalog that we're distributing when we were combined with Bloomington was not listed at all in Spanish. So one of the things we started back in the winter of 2018 was to begin some information in Spanish. So on the covers, some of the key information, the registration, the contact information, we've started adding that all along to our publication. We've also, over the past 5 seasons, added specific classes that are taught in Spanish for adults. So some are a full immersion Spanish and some are bilingual. So debuting in our upcoming new catalog will be a symbol to help clarify which programs are actually bilingual. They've been in there, and we actually are up to 20 now with this catalog, 20 different offerings that are featured, but they're kind of mixed in with them. So this will help people distinguish it. It's a little confusing for the community because the classes that are promoted at the schools and with our early learning are listed in Spanish and English, but none of them are taught in Spanish. They're taught in English. So when you have the adult classes, we've just been formulating feedback and putting some things into motion to help clarify for the greater community. Because those of us that are working in the system, we know what we're talking about and what we need. Some other things that we're tailoring to meet our needs in Richfield include changing our structures, removing different barriers. This is an example of a couple of flyers on a program that we partnered with several community members, MIRA, the baseball and softball associations. We had some funding donations from the Saints. But it allowed us to identify several of our goals and needs in one area. So I thought it was a good example to share. Instead of your traditional youth clinic that is offered where a family comes and drop off your child and the child goes to the clinic, parent goes away, they come back later. This was set up as a family involvement clinic. So it was structured to specifically target our Latino families who have expressed a preference for family multi-age activities, and also just anyone that is new to the sport that might be interested in getting a little bit more information. We wanted to help promote physical activity as well. That's a need in our community and in general in the nation, particularly for youth of color. So this was promoting physical activity, introducing an affordable activity with equipment that they could take away as well, wiffle balls and bats that they could take home, and encouraging them to adopt this as an activity with their family that they can play. Also to learn and build relationships with the organizations in our community that offer activities. They offer practices and an opportunity to join a team. But to help our families navigate what that is and how that works, how those structures work. So we were providing that service as well. And then last but not least, it gave us an opportunity to try some activities on a Sunday afternoon. Our needs assessments have been coming through with requests for a variety of schedules that Richfield has never offered before, or very limited through our community education. So this was a successful opportunity in that regard too, to be able to offer some Sunday afternoon activities with friends. Other adaptations that we're making are simply offering childcare with some of our adult classes on site. We're also trying some double scheduling where children have one class and adults have a different class. They're separate, but they're at the same time and location. And then we also have success with some of our Friday evening activities and family field trips. With our adults world, another example that I want to bring up is just that structure and kind of the things that we take for granted with community education, adult programs, and many things that we attend as adults. You sign up, you pay a registration fee, and then there are other requirements. And this is true even of youth activities. You need to get some equipment, you need to buy some extra supplies, you need to bring some things with you in order to come to the program. So we changed up some things a little bit and went for a grant to help us start accumulating some of our supplies, because our adults don't often have time, they might not have the financial means, they might not know if they really have that strong of an interest in that activity to bother signing up and going through all of that. So for a variety of reasons, that grant really helped us to try some things with our adult programs, get some funding to cover some of those fees, and build up a base of supplies. So now we have supplies like paintbrushes and easels and things that we can use much like you would during the school day in the classroom, but this is built through the community, through the grant, through the fees, so that it's more accessible to all the adults. And we did get 46 participants, and 36 of those were brand new to us. So that worked out to be a very successful pilot as well. And the feedback from those participants were the top two reasons that they participated were the low class fee and the convenience of the supplies being included. So we do continually gather. As you can see, we gather input, feedback, ideas continually from a multitude of different avenues coming at us. We do our best to respond to those needs and continually prioritize what we're working on at any time. We have a couple of examples, like Sheridan Hills, Principal Stachel had several parents coming to her wanting her to start an after-school Spanish class. If you get a Spanish class, they want to learn Spanish. We were able to find an instructor. It took us a little bit, but we got an instructor, we got a curriculum together, and we're offering a full class. There's a waiting list, and we're looking to expand that more. So we're able to address those needs. We also had a parent contact us earlier this year about a chess activity. They saw a chess club, and they were going to another community. Couldn't we have it in Richfield? Do we have it in Richfield? Looked around, asked with some principals. Don't have it. We organized that. We have 3 going now at our elementaries, and there are 34 students involved in that. So we got that started up. And just last week, we had learned about community concerns for indoor gym time, playtime for families with really young children in Richfield. Particularly this winter, it's getting to be pretty long. So we said, we can do that. Let's figure it out. And we have a new offering that's going to be starting up on March 2nd for the Saturday mornings in March. So we can't do everything, but we do try to respond, and we're able to respond fairly quickly to a lot of the needs when they make sense. Progress on a couple of our goals here. We're pleased with being able to address some of the features of our strategic plan, involve more students in our out-of-school time activities. Reduce those financial barriers. There are things like targeted efforts of outreach, purposeful planning with our programs, connecting our families to the resources have benefited our community education youth programs. And then our adult programs as well. Oftentimes adult programs are not necessarily a growing thing, but they are growing for us. We're making good progress with our adult programs. Overall, over the 5 catalogs that we've actually registered for so far, it's almost the same number of classes, but we are really building our audience, and then we're also decreasing those cancellation rates that we saw in the past. So by putting that time and attention into what we offer, how we offer it, and who we're letting know about it, it's heading in the right direction there. Noted also are the number of new participants that we've gained in the 18 months or so since we started Richfield Alone programming. And our youth cancellations, which aren't noted on there, also have improved. They were 20% and now they're down to only 14%, which is actually a bit low. Industry standard is 20 to 25%, so we really should be offering more and getting more out there so we can see what's going and what's not, and what's of interest. We're just currently doing a lot with maximizing resources. We're doing a little bit of growth. We're just partnering and making improvements as much as we can. These are some of the ways that we've been able to do that. Our MIRA partnership has been, we started last year with that $16,000. This year we were able to secure $36,000 and continue to grow that. It's a huge asset for us, very helpful, assisting us with coordination of programs, office team support, additional presence and bilingual assistance at the office as well as in the community. They help us represent the schools and our programs. The recruiting of instructors has been amazing. They can help us find both bilingual instructors, but also participants in messaging and creating that relationship with families that can come to us for services and programs, and they can also teach with us. So that's been fantastic. We are also the facilitators of the READY Collaborative. So Richfield READY, we've increased each year in the grant that we get there as well. And that benefits the whole community, but specifically for community education youth programs, just in the last year, our fees through scholarships have come in, over $9,000 have come in through scholarships to support kids' participation in our community youth programs. The Outreach and Engagement Grant, that's a district-wide grant, but that supports community education in a few ways too, as far as staff, some of our staff time, some of our data management, and community events. So small pieces that help with that as a part of that integrated grant system. I mentioned that MRAC grant, which is Metropolitan Regional Arts Council, and last year was $5,000 for those 6 piloted adult classes. We are awaiting word on another $5,000 which we requested this year to offer family opportunities in the arts. And so taking what we've learned from some of our other programs and hopefully applying that to the family model. So what's next? We have, of course, a long list. I'm sure you may as well. There's a lot of potential. We're here to respond to those needs, as we were saying, be available to support the strategic plan. Some of the things that I wanted to highlight, we have a new site supervisor position, which is actually funded from the classes as they move. So if there are classes happening, we want to have a representative out there to help greet everybody, to provide customer service, safety during those after school and evening hours, just positive experiences, have somebody there. Also, we want to continue testing those different schedule options. People want more variety in when things are offered and want that accessibility. So we are striving to look at that. And then extended hours, having more variety of schedules around our youth programs. If it's a non-school day or in the summer, people can't always get there when it's from 9 to 3 or 9 to 12. So if we can extend some hours and try some things with flexible options for scheduling. Non-school community locations that are available in our community can be great places for programs, whether they're parks or apartment buildings, different facilities. There may be businesses willing to host things. We do have some relationships started at Seasons Park in Yorkdale, so those are opportunities. We have a bus pickup scheduled for a spring break family field trip at Seasons Park, so we'll see. That is a direct request that has come to us from families in that area. They see our family events, they want to join us, and they need that transportation. So we are going to try that out as well. We have aquatics interest. We know there's a need for more aquatics programming and interest in our community. That's something that we see as an opportunity to collaborate with our high school. We can train our students to be lifeguards and to be instructors. We can talk about future careers in fields like recreation and the like. So we can explore those options and partner with a lot of community members that have the same interest. We also are working with our advisory council just to make sure that we're not duplicating. There is a policy that we need to adopt and bring forward on non-duplication. What is our process for that? So even though we go through that process as we're getting these needs and trying to find out if we should serve a certain need or not, there needs to be more of a policy on how that's done and in what order. So that's something that they're working on, as well as just involvement of other adults, staff, instructors, volunteers. Our budget area, we are looking at a lot of things with that best practices. So following the models and the research as to what it is that works best for the pricing, how to target our marketing, how to do more with less. We are right now covering for our adult programs all of our expenses of those programs with the fees. So we've got a great start on that. We also are contributing some funds from that to our overhead. So that's what you want in an adult program. We're pleased with that. In our youth area and also a bit still in our adult, we're revising some of our contracted agreements and negotiating rates and things, trying to get a system that is going to work in Richfield. A lot of the rates and the classes are a little bit high. So we need to change how we pay, how we structure things. Each class is its own little budget, so we want to make sure that we are looking at what are those fees, what's fair, about what's affordable, and what supplies are included and those types of things. So we're really spending time on that right now, and kind of some of those overall decisions that go toward access and participation. It's time to really start looking at our staff structure, the priorities, of the board and for the district, and how we want to align our staff to that. We have these ideas and probably a few others, but we're looking forward to planning. I think we're off to a really great start, identifying the needs and interests here in Richfield and a lot of things that we've been kind of strategically trying. So with that, I think that's the end of my overview. If you had any specific questions or follow-ups you'd like in the future.
Thank you so much, Carol and David and Yakaira, for being in the audience as committee members, for your moral support and work that you do. I know I have learned a lot about community education since I started representing the board on this committee after Mr. Ashmead had done so for a number of years, maybe? So thank you. I think it's a really helpful overview of just about where we are as a new program and also where you're thinking about heading from here. So questions, comments?
I would just say that I really appreciate how you are, it seems like you're very constantly analyzing where you are and what you can do better and what the needs might be. So you're not setting this up and going forward and this is our program. It seems like you're very continually assessing how it's going and what can be improved.
I have one quick question for you, if nobody else does. Because we are still so new and we're a smaller district running our own community education program, are there good models for us to be looking at as far as other communities that are similarly sized or are trying to do similar work to us?
We are looking at and gathering from other community ed directors their models. It's hard at this stage. We are at a point where a lot of those programs were maybe 20 years ago. They have a lot of other structures built up, to support their community ed decisions. So yes, we are in that process. I can't name any specific ones that we're pointing to right now, but it is part of the process, and that discussion's already been started with some other districts. So to be continued.
Great. It'll be helpful as we
Yeah.
talk more about the future, as you said, and
Exactly.
the ideas that you and your team are thinking about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So our last item in this section is commendations, of which we have several tonight.
Absolutely, we do. And so we are going to start actually with Sarah Jesperson. And so as the American Indian Parent, that's okay. The American Indian Parent Advisory Committee was talking about American Indian education overall, specifically how they've expanded the program for American Indian students. We can also look at ways that Sarah goes above and beyond and is able to expand that for others. And so we received a commendation from the 6th grade social studies team to thank Sarah Jesperson. Sarah created a one-day presentation for our 6th grade Minnesota history students in January, explaining to 6th graders her own ancestry and background with the Blackfeet Indian tribe in Montana. Sarah went on to explain to our sixth graders about all the Dakota and Ojibwe reservations in the state of Minnesota and shared beadwork that her grandmother created and other artifacts to show our sixth grade students. Sarah also taught the students about the many powwows that Native Americans do still to this day. It was a great opportunity to have Sarah in our building teaching our sixth graders about Native American history. Students were elated to have her in class. They were also fascinated by the artifacts she brought in, especially the beadwork belt. We're so thrilled to have this partnership with Sarah and excited to continue this future for our sixth graders. And so we commend Sarah Jesperson for her work with our sixth grade students. Similarly, we got a commendation from Lori Jackson about our overall fifth grade class at STEM school, and she wanted to share this with everyone. Some of you may know, her son Sam is employed at Highland Hills Ski Area. Last evening, Sam gave me a call to let me know that the fifth graders from STEM were the best behaved, respectful, kind, most fun group of students that they had out there all season. Sam said that the STEM Sparks made his day at work yesterday so much fun, way to go, and in the STEM cheer, we are proud of you. We are proud of you.
My son was in that group.
Congratulations to
Aiden in class.
And
I'm
congratulations
sure he was
to the
not one of
fifth grade
those.
STEM Sparks. Next, we have a commendation written by Melissa Carter, a parent, out to Randy Johnson, custodian, and Dan Kretzinger, Director of Facilities and Transportation. Melissa wrote, I wanted to express sincere thanks to you all for plowing the sidewalks at STEM. I was specifically impressed to see you, Dan, the Director of Facilities, out there actively working on the grounds. She also wanted to take time to specifically express gratitude for Randy. Randy is a fantastic custodian, taking such good care of the STEM school and being part of the students' experience there. My boys adore her. Thanks for all you do. Showing that our building and grounds people do a great job not only taking care of our building and grounds, but in providing customer service and serving the students and families. So thank you to Dan, and thank you to Randy. Next up, we have Mr. Craig Holge. We received confirmation from MASBO, which is the statewide organization of business officers, who announced that Craig Holge has successfully completed the MASBO Voluntary Certification Program and recently received his certificate of completion. The program is designed to offer practical information to assist school business professionals in excelling in their field. Ensures a base of knowledge for all participating members, including general ed funding, special ed, budgeting, accounting, auditing, legal and personnel, food service, transportation, and building and grounds. So certification for Mr. Holge, and an exciting addition for our staff to have Mr. Holge completing this course. Congratulations and thank you, sir. Last but certainly not least, it is also School Board Recognition Week. And so this is a great time to commend our school board members, our 6 elected officials, and our student representatives. 1 week a year, we acknowledge above and beyond the work that you do for our students, for our staff, and for our community. And so this is a recognition week, and it's important for us to commend you on all the time that you give to support the student, staff, and community. And so on their behalf, I want to commend you and thank you for all your work.
Thank you. I'm going to add one on here at the last minute. I can get it in writing for the relevant individuals, but I really wanted to appreciate the Richfield Tap Bears and celebrate them for making it to the state tournament. They were one of the top 12 teams in Class A for jazz dance, and so that is certainly worthy of celebration. And I happened to go to the competition the next day. Sadly, I was not able to see them, but one of my family members was performing for another team. And I think it was just as meaningful for me to hear from my family members who have been at, I don't know how many competitions over the last year, that the Tap Bears had grown so much over the course of the year, that they were just such an impressive team, and that they were noticeably always one of the kindest and most supportive teams at meets and competitions to others. And I just think that is such a wonderful thing to hear about our team. So just wanted to appreciate them.
And aside to that, a parent came up to me and said, when my daughter started, there were 4 girls on the team. Now, they've got 2 great coaches. I met both of these young ladies, and they just do a super job. And the girls are excited, and it's fun to see.
Yeah.
They've really turned that program around. So coaching makes a difference.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. We now move on to the consent agenda. And so our next item of business is approval of the consent agenda, which is our routine business items. As always, if there is an item that somebody would like to have pulled for individual consideration, that can be requested at this time. Otherwise, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I will move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Tensing and a second by Ms. Malik. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the consent agenda is approved. So moving into old business, we have several items before us this evening that we have seen before that really relate to two policies and then related administrative guidelines. So first up is board policy 547 and the administrative guideline on student dress. So we first saw this at our last meeting. Superintendent Yanoski, would you like to share the update?
Absolutely. So this is a second read. So again, we are not pushing this forward for passage. So we have done some significant overhaul, again, of the dress policy, and the Safe and Supportive Schools team continues to have that conversation about student dress and dress code. And specifically, there was a lot of conversation at the most recent meeting about hats and what qualifies as a hat. And so you'll see in section 2 under definitions, some additions related specifically where we really began to break down what is a hat. And then created the term or added the term headgear to separate that specifically out from being hats. It also clarified at the board suggestion, separating out that hats and headgear for religious reasons are not governed in the same way. And then also specifically from a clothing perspective, added a particular caveat that shirts are required to be worn. And that was something that the committee and group felt was needed to be added in section 3B, I believe. Yes. So where we are at in the continuing and ongoing development of the policy is we continue to take feedback. There is expected to be one more Safe and Supportive Schools team meeting prior to this coming back. And there was a request because of the significant snow at the most recent meeting, there wasn't the team didn't feel there was satisfactory parent input, and so principals have been tasked with taking the draft guidelines and the draft policy out to their PTOs and to their parents to gather additional feedback prior to bringing it back to the board for a third and or possibly fourth, and before we move that for possible passage. With that, I will open that up for questions or comments.
I have been in several spirited conversations over the last couple of weeks. First with a group of our high school students. I think we've maybe had 15 to 20 high school students that really gave a lot of helpful input, and especially a conversation centered around hats and headgear that is reflected here. And then I was also at the meeting where teachers were not able to attend because of conferences, but we had a couple of staff members and one parent who was able to attend. So I'm excited to hear that there's more parent outreach that is also going to be happening. So I'm also happy to answer questions about those conversations, especially the ones with the students, since I was fortunate to be a part of them. And Diego, Luis, and Nasir, if you have questions or thoughts, of course, would love to hear them.
I just have one comment, and this is me. I'm ready to slide down the canyon on this. I worry about the shirts required to be worn without defining what a shirt is, because a student could wear a one-piece garment that covered adequately from the shoulders to the knees, but is not actually labeled a shirt.
That's helpful.
The committee will definitely take that and review that from a language perspective.
I appreciate the sentiment.
Yes.
That shirts
And
are to be worn.
That was added because of the question or concern that the preceding sentence, clothing that covers all undergarments and or covers all private parts, could potentially be construed as not requiring shirts. So I think
Right.
that it's helpful to think about how that addition leads to other questions.
There's a great deal of complexity to create something that is inclusive and yet not leaving it hard to define.
I have in general statement, so 3B2. B says appropriate clothing includes, but it's not limited to the following. And then it says headgear worn for medical, cultural, or religious observance. And the idea of appropriate and medical, and then makes me worry that some people are going to say, if I'm wearing something for religious purposes, that someone may say, well, that's not really appropriate, religiously appropriate, you know what I mean? Like, if it's something that only the person knows about, makes me think of sometimes, hairstyles or the, but really, like, who is to tell someone what's appropriate or not in the religious area? Is who's going to be the police for that?
That has come up in some conversations, and whether we're asking people to share information that they may not be comfortable sharing.
Right. That is the challenge, and what some of the conversation did definitely center around. So we'll look at seeing if there's ability to clarify that, or what we can look at with language there.
The one question that I had after reading this revised version is Section 1 purpose. It specifies that this policy includes after-school and community education programs for students unless uniforms are required. But I think a separate question is the extent to which this governs things at athletic events, for example, that take place in our gym, or where does this policy end, I guess, is the question when we're talking about things that are taking place within our buildings. And I actually don't know that I have my own opinion yet, but I think it's something for us to consider as we revise this.
We'll add that to the notes.
I was just going to just reflect that since I had asked about the hats, I was appreciative of the work that was done to clarify that. I know that at our last board meeting, at least, a lot of the conversation centered around the sort of clarifying the educational purpose of the prohibition on hats. And there was at least informal conversation during that meeting about how a hat with a brim that sort of pulled low over the face or over the eyes can sort of interfere with the ability of the student to fully engage in the class activity. So if that becomes a helpful piece in terms of when we're trying to navigate some of the complexity.
Well, I think that was the
Observances
substantial
there.
conversation at Safe and Supportive Schools. There was conversation about hoodies. There were conversations about things that covered ears. The students and parents and staff involved had quite significant conversations and thoughts about each of those pieces, about why you would have something allowed and why you wouldn't have other things allowed. And so a lot of thought went into that conversation from the constituents as part of those conversations.
I think, I guess when Paula asked her question, it just sort of occurred to me that that has potential to become a differentiating factor if there's a dispute about whether a particular piece of headgear falls into the appropriate category or not.
Agreed. And that will be part of clearly the ongoing conversation. Along with the other policy, what I anticipate is in our third read at our next meeting, we'll bring back a clean copy of all the changes that have happened. I anticipate it then going before Safe and Supportive Schools one more time, and then likely bring it back at the second meeting in March, looking towards passage if we are at that place. Anything else before we move on to 979? All right, so we have a return of School Board Policy 979, school community use of school facilities and grounds, and then the guidelines 979-1 for the use of schools and 979-2 use of grounds. And so to refamiliarize ourselves, this is all about prioritizing how people will be allowed to schedule use of our schools and use of our grounds. How are people categorized in terms of priority? But then also how people are prioritized in terms of fees. So we took a significant break in this policy because we were working on our partnership with the city and trying to determine what level of category partner they were, category 1 or category 2. We also had a lot of things to clarify and a lot of study to do in relation to what are typical rental fees of neighboring districts and how do we decide each of these particular categories and how do we decide each of these charges. What you see before you is that next iteration of the policy. It's actually around our 4th read. However, I anticipate bringing this back 2 more times. Again, a clean copy next meeting. And then an additional round of input from the athletic and extracurricular advisory team. Just last Wednesday, we reviewed this for about an hour, hour and a half with the athletic extracurricular advisory. Talking about categorization, continuing to clarify how people get into different categories. We actually talked about different options like charge by the hour, charge by the day, charge by the head, and why one might charge by the hour and why some things are charged by the day. Why there are smaller charges for one type of gymnasium perhaps and a larger charge for a grass field that might require different upkeep. And then just trying to figure out and look at each single one of these line items and make sure that the fees are appropriate, honoring what the board guidance has been, which are our partners. We want to honor the partnership, which means higher prioritization for use and lower fees. And then those who might be lower on the prioritization and categorization. So those are for-profit type industries that might then be charged a higher rate and get a lower priority in terms of the rental of our resources. So with that, reintroducing the policy, I will open it up for questions. Again, reminding that this is a read to refamiliarize today, clean copy at the next meeting, and then another round of input and possibly ready for passage at the second meeting in March. With the goal of having fees updated and in place, so people as they are planning their budgets, and this was important to the athletic and extracurricular advisory, groups are planning their budget for a year from now, and they'll be doing that this spring up until about May. And so we want to get this in place so that people know what those fees will actually be.
Questions or comments? It's a lot of words in very small font.
Again, reminding us that we also have a month so that there is several meetings to give feedback.
I think the question that I'll have as we get closer to actually taking action on this is, what are the concerns that people have about whatever the sort of next version is, so that we have a sense and can be hearing from whether it's the community organizations or whether it's the extracurricular advisory committee, what they are sharing with us, because I just feel like I don't have a good enough sense of that right now.
I think some of the main concerns are when it is implemented that the organizations that have built their schedules around the use and the costs around them, that it's been communicated in a timely manner or implemented in a way that doesn't change what their existing cost or field reservation system is in the timing where they don't have an opportunity to address it. So.
And also that it's clear and easy to understand for someone who looked at it outside. So someone that's running a youth organization can look at that and figure out exactly what it would cost them and what they would need to do to be able to utilize the resources.
Okay, not seeing anything else. We will move into our new business items, of which we have 2 this evening. First is the proposed school calendar for 2019-2020 and a draft of the proposed calendar for 2020-2021. Do I have that right, Mr.
Correct,
Holtje?
yep.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. So the district calendar committee met again this year, and we're in a good situation where we're working basically a year ahead, trying to draft and get some good framework, and then we're able to come back and do some revisions on that. And so the proposed 2019-20 calendar is one that was contemplated last year with some revisions and some reconsiderations made this year. It has school starting on, well, I should start out and say, it complies with all the statutory requirements versus starting the school year, the number of days and things like that. And also looks at some information that way. We start the school on September 3rd, which is the day after Labor Day, and we end school on June 5th, which is that Friday with students, and then there's 1 to 2 days of staff workshop after that. It has conferences in October for our K through 8 with MEA break again, or scheduled on the 17th and 18th. The staff development day the first week of November on Friday, November 1st. One of the things that was discussed last time is it is great to have the day after Halloween when kids are sugared up and not worried about sending them back as parents or how late they are out that night before, and also just that ability to concentrate that day after Halloween. So that was one of the things we took into account, parent feedback as far as educational opportunities that way. Thanksgiving break occurs that last week of November, and it has a 2-week winter break scheduled this year. Going from December 23rd through January 3rd, with school returning on January 6th. One of the items that was discussed this year was we have Martin Luther King Jr. Day, we have end of semester day, we have a professional development day that last week in January. Is there a way that we can bring some of that together? When we looked at schedules as part of the committee, we looked at, is there a way to move that so that it's a Friday through Monday 4-day break? The challenge that we ran in there is with the end of semester days at the high school, it really is much more optimal for them to have 2 days because they can do a day of grading, a day of professional development, and have students ready and registered for their second semester. The other thing we talked about is if we move that up to January 17th, we end up with a 5-day week, a 4-day week, a 4-day week before we get into a 5-day week. And so coming back after winter break and having a couple full 5-day weeks help students and families get into that schedule and routine. And so there was some discussion on that, and ultimately the committee recommended moving forward with leaving it as it has been over the years with that schedule, lining up with the end of semester grading period for our high school. We end up with additional conferences in February with a conference comp day on the 14th, and this one we were able to connect that up with President's Day. So there is that 4-day weekend for staff and students and families that week. Tied with the President's Day, Staff Development Day, the first, that's March 6th, and then spring break is March 30th through April 3rd. One of the things that the committee has talked about is trying to have it either or alternating between the last week of March and the first week of April. We have a couple of years where we have about a half and half, 50-50 break between the number of days that are March and the number of days that are April. And so that sequences end with that combination of last week of March, first week of April, tied in with that. And then Memorial Day is off, and then we end school on the 5th of June. So that's a highlight of that calendar. It is recommended unanimously from that committee. There were 28 individuals represented on that committee that really were across the span of all of our schools, all of our programs, parents that were involved in that process as well, making recommendations and having that conversation. And I'll just kind of preview next year's calendar before we kind of offer it up for additional conversations or questions. When we look at next year's calendar, there are a number of similarities. One of our challenges here is we actually, Labor Day is the 7th of September. So it is late, but it is an ideal situation for Richfield right now because that summer of 2020, we will have all of our buildings except for dual language school under construction. So ending school on June 5th and then starting on September 8th is really an ideal situation. We talked a little bit about do we go early, but because of that construction schedule, really feel like this is optimal for our situation this year and really kind of falling into a routine. The rest of the October and November dates are very consistent, except we moved our March Professional Development Day up to November 3rd, which is Election Day. Knowing that that's a larger general election and having presidential election and parents coming in or community members coming in and voting really causes a lot of disruption. We did this a few years ago too. where we combined and did 2 professional development days in a row, and that really was an ideal situation from our school's perspective. And parents also were very vocal about the fact of having students out on a day when there's so many community members coming into that school. It really is an ideal situation. In this situation, we also did kind of continue that conversation of a 2-week winter break, or do we have an 8-day winter break or some shorter period that way? And the committee unanimously is recommending that 8-day winter break that year. One of the big factors is, and we've talked about this every year, is the continuity of programming. The extent of 2 full weeks does create some disruption of families. There is some opportunities for travel that provide some opportunities for some individuals, but at the same time, it creates some challenges for others, especially when we're looking at continuity of education as well as nutrition services, realizing that a number of our families really are reliant on school for nutrition programming. And so finding that balance, knowing that there are years like next year where a 2-week winter break is ideal, but there are other situations where if we have a couple days on either end, it really is just as effective to have that shorter break. The other real driving factor on this, honestly, and this is what, when people came in, didn't realize it always impacts it, is if we look at having a 2-week winter break, the only place that we can really build that in is either shortening spring break, which isn't an ideal situation, or we end up going with students until June 11th, and then staff are coming back that following Monday and or Tuesday. And parents that were on the committee originally came in saying, we really like that 2-week winter break, but when they realized how late that pushes them into the summer, it became yeah, nobody wants to do that anymore. So there's a lot of those complicating factors that a lot of times, honestly, people think, well, I like this and I like this and I like this, but there's offsetting implications on what that means because our total day count really has to be relatively consistent, and so that those additional days have to come someplace. So that recommendation for next year is that it's an 8-day break. We did leave that January in that same place for the conversations as well as the rest of the time, and spring break falls again that last week of March, first week of April, tied into that. So we're not voting on that. At some point, we might get to a point where we have a baseline calendar that identifies the winter break time, starting any date in spring break, so parents can make travel plans or implications that way and kind of fill in some of the additional pieces. But at this point, we are just recommending that calendar for the 1920 school year be approved by the board tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. Questions or comments?
I just have one question, kind of to follow up. The last time we went through this, I recall bringing up the fact that if you have the last day of school on a Friday and then high school graduation is that same Friday, that can be a challenge for students to be taking final exams all day and then going right from that to a bus to graduation. And I know we did that one year and it didn't go well. I also remember there was some discussion about seniors being able taking their finals earlier and having an earlier end date. So is that part of the plan, or is that still in the works?
That is, there's planning around that piece specifically as far as what those opportunities are. We really are defining our calendar by the number of days that are for across the district. We haven't carved out the senior end date, and that just blocks into what their final schedules would be.
One of the conversations we've had with our high school team is that many schools around the metro end high school for seniors a couple days in advance, all the way up to a week in advance, to give them time to take finals, grade finals, and make sure that there's also that additional time to make up work. We wanted to work through the overall calendar first, and then that is a good question for you all as a board, as you all set policy and you all set some of the expectations. We need to see how people feel overall about reducing for seniors. One of the things we have to keep in mind is that there's an expected 165 days of school. We actually did this math as a management team. We are well within the hour range and are not overly concerned, despite snow and weather, that we will go under the required hours from a statutory perspective. But our secondaries have 171 days scheduled. You're expected to have at least 165 days, which means 6 cancellations put you into that gray area. Right now we have 3 cancellations, 171, 69, 70, 69, 68. That gives us 3. If we have our seniors end 3 days early, we would now be at a place where we would be in danger of not meeting statutory expectations for seniors. So we need to balance that as we have that conversation, and then also bring back to both the board, but bring back to the high school admin, how do we do that while making sure we meet the expectations, but providing the best environment for everybody. So we're gonna look at that in the coming weeks, separate from the overall calendar.
I just have a comment, Craig. Can you talk again about the Christmas break or the winter break? 8 days for 1920. I'm sorry, 2 weeks for 1920, but eight days for the draft proposal. And it doesn't strike me as very different that the both could be 8 days if we chose with sort of the same framework. So why was it advantageous to have one of them be 2 weeks?
So when the holiday falls right smack in the middle of the weeks, it becomes a little bit more challenging to schedule, 1 day on each week, or if we come back on the second or third. There's some perspective of being that day right after New Year's Day is a little bit close. It certainly is doable, and we discussed that as an option. But also knowing the fact that we're pretty much split when we've done surveys of do we want a 2 week winter break or do we want a less than 2 week winter break. That a week or a year when that falls right in the middle of each one of those weeks, it is an opportunity to do something for those families or staff members who are wanting 2 full weeks, knowing that it's once every 4 or 5 years that you get that chance to do that on that rotation.
It's every 7.
But there's, well, and then there's different years going up there. So it's we've done that a couple times where it is the full
Okay.
2 week winter break, but it's when it's right in the middle of the calendar. Coming back on second and third seemed a little bit tight. Coming back on the third and fourth is a little bit more time between that holiday like we did this year, or going the 21st, 22nd.
So just for, I guess what I'm hearing then is coming back to a 2-day week is tough, but exiting on a 2-day week is okay.
There's split purposes where this year coming back on a 2 week winter break, some people said it was nice coming back because you have 2 days to kind of get everybody back in the steam, do some renewal, and then you start on January. I think it's the middle of that proximity to the holiday. And if it's 1 day after New Year's, then it's a little bit tight, or if it's 1 day before the Christmas Eve, Christmas Day celebration and things like that, or the holidays, those seem to be the times that it is a little bit tighter. So that's
fine. No,
the feedback that we've gotten.
Okay, thank you.
And the request is that we do formally approve the 2019-2020 calendar this evening, correct?
That's the only calendar we're looking at.
Greg, one thing with Thanksgiving, so the Wednesday is shaded pink,
Yep.
but it's not listed on the right. It's just listing Thursday and Friday. So this is just my little OCD brain thinking of.
I think it's just out of sequence.
Out of
So
order.
the 27th is a conference comp day.
I see. Okay.
I think it just got, because the end of
You-
trimester got blocked in there, and
Okay.
it normally is at that same time, but
Your OCD brain still won't like it.
yeah.
He
We'll
made
fix-
it
that we
worse
will fix
now.
It's out of sequence.
It's worse now.
that we will fix and clean up. So basically you're looking at the dates. There's things that get added as far as some of the additional changes to this, as far as where some of those end of trimesters end and end of quarters end and things like that. So there's a little bit of flexibility that still falls within that aren't what days that we're in school, which is the biggest piece that we're looking at for board approval.
I will move that we approve the 1920 calendar as presented.
I will second that.
So we have a motion to approve the calendar for 2019-2020 by Mr. Tensing and a second by Mr. Ashmead. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the calendar is approved. So next, we have a request to authorize the business office so that they can enter into an agreement to purchase 2 school buses and 1 mower. Mr. Holge and/or Mr. Kretzinger.
Dan is here
Okay.
for any questions that pop up, but I'll go through the highlight of this. Again, we're requesting 3 vehicles to be purchased. and 3 vehicles that will be sold or kind of removed from our fleet at this time. There's information here regarding the details around those. And one other just kind of clarification, and based on feedback that we've gotten from the board in the past, typically we've done these as lease purchases. We feel like this is a time, because we only have 2 buses and then 1 lawnmower that are being replaced. It's an opportunity for us to move into a actual capital purchase at this point, and we don't see a need to do the lease piece. We also ended last year with a reserve of about $800,000 in our capital expenditures. This allows us to spend some of that money on those purchases versus having to be that lease payment and paying the interest on that. So just to kind of highlight that piece and the responsiveness from previous discussions. The vehicle replacement program, and just kind of highlighting our program. Obviously, as a Richfield School District, our first priority in our transportation department is safety, reliable transportation for our students and families. When buses are offline, it creates delays, it creates challenges that way. It also creates safety hazards when the maintenance isn't able to keep up with the demand. There are a number of measures that we've taken in our fleet to improve our safety and equipment. Purchasing buses that are equipped with stop arm cameras as well as interior cameras for students and drivers, so that we have better monitoring and better observations and data to support concerns. And also making sure that there's a news coverage earlier this year on different districts that have those stop arm cameras and how they increase reporting and provide more information for police when people are putting our students at risk by not following the stop arm restrictions. Enhancing our safety and emergency preparedness program for the drivers. Dan and his team have been doing a lot more training around both driver training, but then also working with students, customer service from that standpoint of how we're responding to those students and interacting with them to ensure that they are safe and the other students on the bus are safe, and then increasing that student driver training for student management and driving skills. When we look at kind of our fleet, we're looking at kind of specific demands, and over the last 3 years, we really have been replacing a fleet that was purchased within a year. We had about 5 vehicles that were all purchased in 2007, and so we've been spanning that out and looking at kind of where are the highest priorities within that. And so we have 2006, 2007, 2008 in the past that we've been replacing, and here we do have a 2009 bus. And as Dan and I were talking about earlier, one of the challenges that we look at is what is that service demand that's on each one of these vehicles, and that number 15 bus, that is the 2009, that's the earliest of the ones that we've been looking at, has had more service demands and more challenges, and so we think that that is one that we should be replacing at this time because it has created more challenges, creating service delays, and then improves our opportunity to function on that. We've used a general guideline of 10 to 12 year rotation on full-size buses, and we look at both the actual mileage as well as the years, hours, and previous mechanical issues that are tied in with that. And then also looking at upgrading our safety equipment and other factors. So safety, looking at updated safety equipment, higher seat backs, corrosion-resistant metals. One of the things that's really interesting is when the State Patrol comes out and does vehicle inspections, they're looking for any possible error, or any possible problem with that bus. So if there's rust on it, if there's seats that are a little bit loose, if there are mirrors that are a little bit loose, those are all things that they're looking for. Remarkably, our team has had very few violations and had, of our entire fleet, 3 small challenges, one with a slight loose seat back, one with a small leak in an exhaust that was caught just at the last minute, and so some very small things with that maintenance they did a great job with. Stop arm and interior cameras that we talked about as far as reducing liability, making sure that people are aware and then also able to report that. When we have concerns that are brought up about things that are on the buses or things that are happening, we have cameras so that we can monitor those interactions and go back and track and see exactly what was happening in those situations so that we can address them appropriately. We talked about the inspection reductions and out-of-service vehicles, variety of factors that are tied in with that. Reduce labor and repair costs if we are replacing our vehicles in a more proactive manner versus just waiting until they're breaking down and then trying to scramble and get things addressed at the last minute. Mitigating financial risks with the vehicle values and things like that, as well as the logistics of buses just being placed out of service because they're spending more time in delays. So that takes situations that just create less predictability, less consistency, and so that's really a lot of the things that are moving through with these recommendations. These are just some typical expenses. We've taken a look at this the last 3 years of what are some of those potential costs if we do end up with more significant repair estimates or repair situations. And then we've talked about that actual miles, and then how that converts to if there are miles spent idling, waiting on buses as they're warming up for students to load, and things like that. The mileage on these two vehicles are 103,000 and 108,000 actual miles. You can see what that hours is and how that translates to that calculation of 182 or 172,000 miles. Over the last 3 years, we've really been replacing things between about 170 and 225,000 hours to miles conversions on that factor. And so this is relatively consistent with what we've been doing the last few times, with a note that that number 15 is one that we've had more challenges on, and so that's the reason why we're recommending that replacement at this time, even though it may be a year earlier than what we'd be taking a look at. And then these are the two vehicles that we're recommending purchasing. The details are in the packet over about 30 different pages, each one of those, as far as the breakdown. $109,000 vehicle and $107,000 vehicle for that 77 passenger and the 65 passenger vehicles. And then the grounds equipment, what we're recommending is disposing of a 1999 Toro lawnmower, which has a value of about $3,000 to $5,000 is what we're expecting on the trade-in value, and then replacing that with a Groundmaster area mower with winter equipment. So it's really is a double functioning. It's not just a mower, but it'll also have a brush on it for the winter clearance, and that has a cab then with that winter servicing as well. And it is kind of scary that a lawnmower costs about as much as a bus does, but with that double service and kind of the extent of how long these vehicles tend to last, that's a recommendation for moving forward on that purchase as well. That's just a picture of what that equipment would look like as a lawnmower, and then with that broom for clearing off the sidewalks and other areas. And with that, I would stand if there are questions, or Dan can respond to more specifics about the maintenance program if you would like. Otherwise, we'd ask for your approval to move forward on that purchase. These are all offered through state contracts, and so that does not require formal bid processes because it is available through that purchasing agreement.
Thank you very much.
Do we have a sense for how many hours the Groundmaster lifespan of a Groundmaster is? I'm looking at so if the Toro is roughly 20 years old and 3,300 hours, we expect many more hours out of the Groundmaster if it's used in all seasons, correct?
Yeah, they're generally getting around 3,000 to 3,500 hours on those, and that's being that it's 20 years old too. It lasts a long time, so we can get a lot of hours out of that lifespan as well, and we're getting close to that point where we're seeing a weakening of the engine and the hydraulics and so forth on that as well.
But what I'm getting at is, should we expect the Groundmaster to last half as long, given that it's running in multiple seasons?
As far
in terms of hours of use.
So the hours would be approximately the same hours as what's expected of that vehicle. So we probably won't get 20 years out of this vehicle, I think is what the question is.
That's essentially what the question is, right? So 20 years, but for something that was only used to cut grass, essentially.
Right. Oh, I see what you're saying.
But the other one has the additional purpose of would be running it, say, tomorrow,
right,
if we had it.
Right. And they are made better now than they were 20 years ago as well, so we're getting a longer life cycle out of those.
Thanks.
If there are no other questions, we could entertain a motion to authorize the business office.
I move we authorize the purchase of the 3 vehicles presented.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Ashmead and a second by Mr. Paulus. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the authorization is granted.
Thank you.
So moving into advanced planning, as always, we'll start with the legislative update. And I know the governor's budget was released today, so I imagine you might have a few words to say about that as we start.
Yes, it was a positive budget, not an overwhelmingly positive budget. From a general fund perspective, the governor projected in his initial budget 3 and 2, so a 3% increase the first year, a 2% increase the second year. working to maintain the cross subsidy or reduce the cross subsidies, and so some looks at special education. Things like renewing levies without going out to vote. However, those levies that pass in the future, and so not necessarily retroactively going through all of those pieces. Looking at renewing that second pot of VPK and voluntary pre-K funding, one of the things that we are looking at and hoping gets renewed as a significant, almost $500,000 impact on our budget. Looking at full service community schools. So as we think of some of the services that we provide as a district, offering grants from the state for full service community schools, things like food shelf, clothing shelf, healthcare, dental services, mental health services. We have found creative grants. This would be something where the state could possibly become a partner with Richfield Public Schools in doing some of that work. Ongoing supports for many of those things we've talked about. And so it is a positive beginning to the conversation around the budget and what things will look like in the next biennium. Anyone else, feel free to add.
I don't see any other legislative items or updates, so we can move on to information and questions from the board.
So I'm seeing that Richfield High School is going to be presenting on the 4th. And so one item that I would like to put on the radar for our high school team to be thinking about, and this is an item that has, we've had some conversation over the last several years, and it has to do with sort of our timing on releasing schedules in the fall, with the general aim that we've been setting to get schedules released to students with hopefully adequate lead time prior to the first day of class for students to do some adjusting and sort of not be running around after that first day of class, getting schedules set. Understanding that there is complexity to that whole process, and that there's a push and a pull and some give and take. It seems like the sooner we can get our minds wrapped around that work and being proactive with doing that work, the better. So I wanted to bring that forward as an agenda item or as something for the high school to tell us about.
Sounds good.
I would add also for if the team would be able to present to us updated numbers on, we'd spoken about the rigorous courses and the participation in them. And in particular, one of the courses, one of the subject areas that lagged was math. Math is not one that you just opt into at the AP level as a junior if you've not been on that pathway. And so I'm curious to see if we've made headway at the younger ages for the honors or AP track math compared to last time.
I guess the other thing that we could probably look for a update on is AP Human Geography. Obviously that last year was the first year where all of our ninth graders, I believe, were sort of enrolled in that AP class, and we'd like to kind of see how that work continues to go.
We might have to give them 2 meetings.
Opportunities for
We
growth
might.
in there, yeah.
Anything else? As I'm composing this in notes, it's going to them in an email right now as we speak.
7-period day updates, the challenges with sports activities and early release
Okay.
with our later release of our students. As long as we're.
If we have any anticipated additional difficulties with that, with the prospective athletic conference too.
Okay. We may, if we don't get to all of
Yeah.
that, we'll have a separate athletics
Well-
presentation, but we will see if we can build that all in.
We imagine we'll hear about the Pathways program too.
Yes.
Okay.
Keep them busy.
Lots to cover.
It's gonna be a long meeting.
The one update I wanted to share, and some people may have already seen this, is the State of the Community event that was scheduled for tomorrow has been canceled and will be rescheduled for a date in April that will be finalized shortly due to the planned snowstorm tomorrow, which I am also going to turn things over to Superintendent to make a real-time announcement about.
So yeah.
Wow,
look at the pressure.
I thought we should get this, in the official meeting.
I got it pop up like.
So let's talk to our students a little bit.
Yeah.
So gentlemen,
You can just say what you had to say.
I'm asking for your opinion. So when I have canceled school, you all have been disappointed because you missed out on those learning opportunities. So as we think about how these decisions are made, we do a lot of collaboration with the Weather Service. They're predicting, they've gone back and forth, 6 to 8 inches. I've seen as high as 15, I heard on the radio coming in. I have seen as low as 5. Wow. It's supposed to start around 2 or 3 in the morning, dump at least an inch an hour for an extended period of time. So we could probably get people to school, but it might be a very significant struggle to get people home. So that's where it starts.
You gotta get home, yep.
Right, we do have to get home. So then we begin to think about what are other districts doing. And so we text back and forth. And so there's a wide range of other districts that have already canceled school for tomorrow because they're concerned about getting their students home. So if you check on one of the news websites, for example, 78 closings, including many of the West Metro districts, city districts have canceled for tomorrow. And then within our protocols, I can make that decision as late as 5 in the morning. So I could get up really early and see what the snow looks like and make that decision, or we could make that decision tonight. And so I wanted to get a little bit of input since you gentlemen are here. What do you guys think?
Well, it's always sad to not have a day of learning. Like I actually like coming to school.
He's lying.
I'm serious. And I have a student government meeting, so I would like to have that. But in reality, I live in Bloomington and I take the bus. And for me, that sucks. Especially when there's snow. So yeah, for me it's hard to get to school and even coming back.
It's helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Folson, any thoughts?
Unless they don't pay me the big bucks to make those decisions.
That is
but
It's a good response.
I can give you my input for free, I suppose.
I'm asking for your free input this year. That's why you're here.
Well, you mentioned the learning experiences that will be missing out. We do have a student government meeting tomorrow. We've already had missing days, et cetera, but at the point, I think you have to fall back on the utilitarianism principle, which is a principle that is for the greater good. So you have to take everyone into account, the general population. And such as Diego said, getting to school and getting home from school, which is the problem in this situation, is the issue. So I think it would be best provided, the potential 15 inches that we could be receiving to cancel school.
So while you're not paid to make that decision, your advice would be to close. Got it.
And he lives in Egan, so
Communication with Richfield Public Works, do you think they will be plowed out by 3 o'clock?
We actually, so again, the snow begins at around 3 o'clock and then begins dumping at an inch an hour. They can't keep up with that.
Oh, no,
and our transportation, so one of the things we have is our transportation team is also our building and grounds team. So they would struggle with driving bus and clearing out of all of our parking lots. And so the only question left then in my mind as I think about it is this: can I actually be in 2 places at one time? Can I be on a phone call to everyone around the entire district at the same time as I'm sitting in this chair? Look at Nasir, he's like, I'm ready to text it out, I'm ready to text it out.
Just one last thing. Was that your question? Was your question answered?
No, my question was concerned getting home.
In the afternoon. You're
By
talking
3
about
o'clock, do you think
Getting plowed in the afternoon.
our 2 public works will be having the
3
streets pretty
p.m.
open?
We do not
3 p.m.
believe that the Public Works would be able to keep up with the snow at 1 inch an hour. And so because it is just going to continually dump,
Until
even
6
the
p.m.
Richfield amazing city team and the incredible, they clear our streets really well, would have the opportunity to keep our streets clear in that type of window.
Okay. Well, we will be on the edge of our seats then for your official decision.
Or because all of the throngs of thousands watching right now.
I'm gonna have to look up the word.
2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now.
So people
Yeah,
have
so
a
just so these
seat.
guys can have it first, because I think it's 8:30. I did give the order while we were sitting here. We actually are canceling school for tomorrow, and the phone call and email will go out at 8:30, and it will be posted at 8:30 tonight. And so as we speak, we'll see, can I be in 2 places? I will be here and I will be arriving on people's
baseball
phones
clinic.
momentarily.
Thank you
So school will
for
be closed tomorrow.
Cool beans.
letting everybody know and sharing a little bit about your decision-making process. Any other information or questions? Okay. Future meeting dates, Monday, March 4th, and as Mr. Tensing shared, we have a presentation from Richfield High School. The second meeting of March will be on Monday, March 18th. We'll have public comment, and we'll also, at this point, plan to include a presentation from our nutrition services team. Are there any items that board members would like to request for future meetings on top of what we have already discussed for our high school team? Seeing none, we have reached a point where we could adjourn if there is a motion to do so.
Move to adjourn.
Second?
So we have a motion by Mr. Pauls, a second by Mr. Ashmead. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the meeting is adjourned at 8:30 p.m.